Thank you all very much for coming. Sorry for the tardy beginning, but it's really a great honor and a privilege to welcome my friend Maziar Bahari here to Carnegie. Maziar is the author of this wonderful book, Then They Came For Me, and it's about his experience in prison in the aftermath of the contested Iranian elections last year, or 2 years ago. And what I would say about Maziar, the best compliment I can pay him is that I think he's the closest thing to be among Iranians of my generation. He's the closest thing I see to being a true Renaissance man, and that he is an accomplished journalist. He's an accomplished writer and author. But some of you may also know that he's also an accomplished documentary filmmaker who's done some wonderful documentary films about Iran. And you have his bio in front of you, so I won't repeat it, but he grew up in Iran. He studied in Canada. He now lives in London. And I would just wanted to begin, Maziar, talking about, you said, I think, in an interview that this book is not only your story, but it's your family's story. And that, your sister served, your sister was in prison, your father was in prison in Iran. And you said this kind of family history of persecution is not unique to your family. It's really kind of a microcosm of Iran's modern history. So talk a little bit about what compelled you to write not only about your own experience, but your family experience.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I'm really glad that we started late, because otherwise it wouldn't be an Iranian event. So we made sure that we are late. When I came out of prison in October 2009, and when I started to write my story in Newsweek magazine, I gave interviews to different broadcasters. People asked me several questions. There were two main questions. One was that why Iran does what Iran does. And the other one was that how did I survive the ordeal? 118 days in prison and 107 days in solitary confinement, relatively unscathed, maybe. Of course, people saw the surface. So in order to answer those two questions, I thought that I should explain it in a book. And when we were discussing the idea with Random House, I thought that, a family story can contextualize what happens in Iran and explain why Iran does what Iran does, because in the book I explained the situation since the time of my grandfather from the 1940s, when he, as a devout Muslim man who was also an alcoholic, started his local branch of the Communist Party in his small town of Bahar, where my family name comes from. And then my father carried on the tradition in 1946. He was a trade union activist. And then he went to jail both before the CIA-sponsored 1953 coup and after the coup, and he was tortured badly, like many members of the Communist Party. And then he rose within the ranks of the Iranian government, and he became a top official, top manager in the government, and he was fired like many government officials. And then my sister carried on the tradition. And it's a very typical story. I mean, for many of Iranians who are here, they know so many families who've gone through the same story. I mean, they may not be members of the Communist Party, but they were like nationalists, or they were members of different Islamist parties. What I think that this kind of a story was maybe unusual for the international audiences and international readers. And I thought I could write an accessible book for people to understand Iran through a family story. But also, the other question was, how did I survive the ordeal? And how did I came out of the experience relatively unscathed? And I saw the answer in also the history of my family and the history of Iran, the fact that I had a deep understanding of the history of Iran. And not only an understanding, but I felt it. It was not an academic exercise for me to understand about torture. I mean, I grew up listening about torture stories through my father and my father's friends and my sister and my sister's friends. So it was something that listening to those stories and not wanting to go through that experience ever in my life, but happening to go through that story was something that I think helped me a lot. And then there were other, of course, elements that really helped me to survive the ordeal, culture, music, literature. And a friend of mine actually the other day was saying that this book is a good cause for culture. It's a good, I'm a good ambassador for culture, that in the age of austerity, when governments cut cultural budgets, first of all, it's going to damage the individuals in the country, citizens in the country, because I think that what really differentiated me and my interrogator, one of the things was that I had more cultural knowledge than he had. I knew about films. I could recreate films, in my head in a solitary confinement where I had nothing to read or nothing to watch. And also I could hum Leonard Cohen's songs in my head. He didn't know about Leonard Cohen. And these things really, when you have nothing, when you're shackled, when you're blindfolded in a dark room, when somebody's beating you, when somebody's threatening you to death, these things really help you. These are the inner resources that he cannot touch. He cannot really take away the fact that I was humming Leonard Cohen, because he doesn't know about it. And that is something very important. I think that again, it's not only about me as an individual, it's also about the culture. It can be basically reason that governments have to sponsor culture in general. Yeah.
I had the pleasure of reading Maziar's book about this time last year, when it was a Microsoft Word document, and we would kind of go back and forth, and he was sending me attachments, and I think the biggest feedback I offered you was that the star protagonist of the book, with all due respect to you, was actually your mother. I thought your mother came out as this kind of incredibly powerful, noble figure, that someone who had a husband in prison for many years, a daughter in prison for many years, and then a son in prison for many years. And now at the age of 80, it was quite remarkable how she handled how her interactions with Iranian officials. So I would love it if you could kind of describe a bit your mother's story, and your mother as a kind of a microcosm for the burden which so many Iranian women have had to bear the last half century.
Well, again, my mother's story is very typical of many mothers in Iran. My mother is a very strong woman, like many other Iranian women. And I think, as Shirin Ebadi says in the blurb on the back of the book, Iran is not only the country of mullahs and Ahmadinejads. It's also the country of people like me and like my mother and others. So one of the reasons, again, I survived was the support of my mother, and I had to pay due to her.
And in your interrogations, Maziar, it seemed to me that the people who were interrogating you were kind of obsessed with two things. One was Jews, and the other was sex. Is that a fair statement? Can you describe a bit kind of the
They didn't know about Anthony Weiner, otherwise they would be interested in sexy Jews, yeah. Or Dominic Strauss-Kahn, yeah. What is it with all these sexy Jews?
Well, describe a bit kind of the conversations you would have with your interrogator.
Well, I think both of those issues, they basically signify more important problem in my interrogator, but also among the revolutionary guards and among the loyal followers of this regime. I was listening to an interview with John Waters the other day, and he was saying that people go to ridiculous lengths in order to have sex. It's the same thing that people go to ridiculous lengths not to have sex, and then it becomes a complex for them. And sexual complexes, I think, are the easiest way for different ideologies to manipulate their followers, and many leaders, many cultish leaders, to manipulate their followers. And I think through sexual politics, the Iranian government has managed to somehow manipulate its followers. And one of the main components of, I think, this ideology is the idea that you have to really behave well, you have to contain yourself, you have to suppress your desires in order to go to paradise, and then act out all your desires. And when you read books like Ma'at, I'm sure my Iranian friends, they've read Ma'at by Ayatollah Dastbeh, which is basically explanation of what happens in paradise. And when you read that, you think that paradise is almost like Mustang Ranch, It's like it's full of rooms and full of people that you can have sex with as much as you want to have, and that becomes a complex for people. So my interrogator, who saw my emails or my pictures with friends, with some attractive women, some. My emails, calling people dear, and say he was just letting his imagination going wild. And my friend Omid Memarian is there, and I think he can testify that his interrogator went through the same thing with him as well. And every prisoner I've talked to, they're saying the same thing. And so he was obsessed. But I guess the difference between also me and many other prisoners was that I spent many years in the West. So he not only resented the fact that I had relationships with women, but also that I was in the West. And his image of the West was what he got through his indoctrinators and also through porn, which I think for people who want to study the understanding of people around the country, around the world, about the West, I think you should take a look at two mediums. One is sports, and another one is porn. Many people around the world, especially in the Middle East, or sometimes, war movies, Rambo films, But the main thing is that main ways that they understand the West is through sports, watching Man United or Liverpool or Chelsea, and thinking that they know about the West because they know how, Wayne Rooney behaves or how Ryan Giggs behaves, and also and through porn. And as a result, they have a really twisted version of the world. They think that, yes, and they mistake it with documentaries. They think that, yes, it's like the porn movies, all the milkmen they can have sex with, whoever they go to serve, and, after delivery, the plumbers, they meet sexual therapists. So that is the world, it is really that way. And so he was, I have it in my book that he was reading about he was going through my contacts on my cell phone, and he was like, Debbie the cleaner. Like, yes, she's my cleaner in London. She comes every week. She's an older Filipino. Oh, Filipino. Just like this really, really twisted version. But also, he had the same fascination with Israel and the Jews. He once told me that we have agents all around the world. And don't you think that we can do the same thing that Mossad did with that Nazi general? And I said, who? You mean Eichmann in Argentina? Yes, that guy. You know so much about him. Yeah, I said, well, I've heard about it, yeah. I said, yeah. Israelis, they managed to, and he was saying that with an envy, that, that he was really admiring Israelis' success in hunting down their enemies, that we can do the same thing. So don't think that you're going to get away with it. But also, he had this image of Israel, like many other Iranian officials, of this really omnipresent force that can do whatever it wants. And he, and I think many of his cohorts, they want to be that force. They don't hate Israel. I mean, they hate Israel for being that, but they also envy Israel.
They're in awe of them.
Exactly. They're in awe of Israel and the Jews. And because I had made a film about the Holocaust in the 1990s, and I may be the only Iranian or Muslim who's ever made a film about the Holocaust, he thought that, I was in cahoots with the Jews and that I did everything according to the Jewish indoctrination. And last week, I have to talk about this. I brought a successful complaint against Iranian English channel Press TV in the UK, and now they're accusing me. It was just last week that I'm a Zionist and a known MI6 agent, and I'm acting according to the Protocol 7 of the Protocols of Elders of Zion. It's a very specific but anti-Semitism. So, yeah.
But speaking about your interrogator, one of the kind of striking scenes in your book for me was when he was beating you with one hand and talking on the phone with his wife with his other hand, and telling her what he wanted for dinner, and was very sweet with her. And he would say he would kind of beat you everywhere but your face, because they didn't want to put you on television and confess, showing that you had a bruised up face. And you've said it now, and you said it in your book as well, that you don't feel this sense of hatred towards him or towards the regime. And first, how do you avoid being consumed with this sense of hate, given that they stole 4 months of your life, they beat you? And second, do you think that, as you said, that there are tens of thousands, perhaps millions of Iranian families who have experienced some type of heartbreak, whether they themselves were imprisoned or their family members were killed? Do you worry that in a kind of a post-autocratic Iran or post-Islamic Republic Iran, that this cycle of retribution is going to continue? Do you think that your feelings are representative of other Iranians, that you want to move on, you're not consumed by hate, or do you worry about this cycle of retribution?
Yeah, well, in terms of my own understanding of my interrogator, and also the way I feel about him and the way I like to feel about him, I have 2 reasons for not demonizing him and not regarding him as a monster. One is that I cannot call him, my interrogator, an animal, because I think it would be an insult to an animal, because animals don't torture each other. Animals don't interrogate each other. There is no case that you find in nature that animals put each other through this pain and enjoy that.
They eat each other.
They eat each other, but that's a necessity, because they're supposed to eat, but it's not torturing
That's
and
right.
not enjoying that, not enjoying another animal's pain. But also, when you call a person a monster, or even a system monstrous or demonic, it means that that system is more powerful than you, that you can never overpower that system. But if you regard that person or the system as a flawed person or a collection of flawed people, then you can find weaknesses in them, and then you can manipulate those weaknesses. So while I was in prison, I tried not to hate my interrogator. I mean, sometimes I cursed him, and even now, sometimes when I think about what he did to me and the way he behaved, sometimes I go through like a series of insults. I feel better, but then I don't hate him that much, because I think he's just a flawed person in a bad system. He is not monstrous. He's not a demon, and no one is. I don't think anyone is, and not the system is. This system is not monstrous as well. They do monstrous deeds, but it's a system. It's a collection of flawed human beings. But I'm not sure whether other Iranian people feel that way or not. I mean, that's why whenever I'm interviewed by Iranian media, I always emphasize on nonviolence and peaceful resistance, because I think we have to stop this cycle of violence at some point. When people talk about no negotiations with anyone in this government, I'm just thinking that, so do you have to kill everyone? Do you have to, put everyone in jail? I mean, these many people in this government, they're just technocrats. I mean, many of them served in the Shah's time. Many of them could serve in the Shah's time. For example, like we're thinking about the current foreign minister of Iran. As far as I know, he's a decent technocrat. He's ambitious. He wants to be a minister. He's somehow devoted to this system. But from what I've heard, he can also be a technocrat in another government. Maybe not the foreign minister, but something else. There are, of course, elements within the system who have acted violently and abused people, and they violated human rights, and they have to be put on trial, and they have to be either pardoned by their victims, or they have to receive certain punishment. But I think we have to, as a nation, I think Iranians have to decide that they have to stop this cycle of violence. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere. I mean, if you just have a series of grievances after grievances, and if you topple this government violently again, that is going to create another violent dictatorship that's not going to take us anywhere. It can be, and I always ask people not to say death to this and that, not death to Khamenei, for example, because there is no point. I mean, even if he dies, someone else can always replace him. I think we have to stop this idea of violence that that nothing can be achieved through.
Let me ask you, Maziar, something that I think it was last year or so. You got a bit of flack for saying on CNN that Ayatollah Khamenei has more supporters than any other politician in Iran. What do you mean by that? What did you mean by that exactly? And would you still make that case, make that argument?
Well, my whole argument was that there is a big minority in Iran who are religious and who are used to live in a monarchy. I mean, you don't have to really act out your anger with what I said last year now. What I mean is that they are religious and they are used to live in a monarchy. And I think that the Khamenei's reign right now is the continuation of monarchy in Iran. It's not an Islamic republic. And many people who are somehow ignorant about the rest of the world, many people who are religious, and many people who are used to live in a monarchy, they support Khamenei. And it's a big minority. And I never said that they are the majority of people, but it's a big minority. They're not like 10 or 15%. I can say maybe they're at least 30%. Of course, there's no scientific survey. It's just based on my own observations, traveling around Iran, talking to people. And my main point was that the opposition outside of Iran and people, Iran analysts, should not really be delusional about Iran, that there is a big group of people, big minority at least, who support this government. This minority, of course, is getting smaller and smaller, but it is still a big minority.
Last question, kind of before I turn it over to the audience. When you look at the current leadership of the opposition, Mousavi, Karbi, or maybe the nominal leadership, are you confident that they can lead this movement, this green movement, to a democratic future? Or do you feel that these folks have kind of exhausted their resources, and the opposition is moving into another phase, which is not calling for simply a reform of the Islamic Republic, but something much more profound?
Well, I'm not sure whether Mousavi and Karoubi, they are leaders of the opposition or they're prominent figures in the opposition. I think one of the beauties of what is happening in Iran right now is that there are no heroes, there are no leaders that people rally around. And I think it's a positive phenomenon because we don't have Imam Khomeini anymore, we don't have Masoud Rajavi anymore, we don't have people who people deify as leaders anymore. And because of that, the movement in Iran is somehow leaderless. And I think it's a positive step. I think it's very democratic. What is going to happen in the future, it depends on how the prominent figures in the movement behave, and and also it depends on the actions of the government. There are different possibilities. I think one of them is for the opposition to attract. I think that will be the most effective way of opposing this current regime in Iran. I mean, Ayatollah Khamenei's regime in Iran, to attract the three main groups of people: the conservative clergy, the traditional clergy, who are not happy with unlike what many people think, they're not happy with what's going on in Iran right now. They do not like the interference of the government in the affairs of the clerical establishment. Second are the merchants of the bazaar. The merchants of the bazaar, they hate the interference of the Revolutionary Guards, Ministry of Intelligence, and the foundations, bonyads in the affairs of the merchants of the bazaar. And also the workers and farmers. I think they have to join the movement as well. I do not see, I see signs that they may join the movement in the future, but they do not have an overwhelming presence in the movement right now. The merchants of the bazaar and the traditional clergy, they prefer stability to change. And any kind of violent change, any kind of revolutionary act, they're not going to join that action. And they hate this regime because this, especially since 2005, Ahmadinejad has been rocking the boat. And it's made them really, really unhappy. But the workers and farmers, I think they will inevitably join the movement because of the economic situation. The government is corrupt, it's mismanaging the economy. And soon when we see that the workers are not getting paid, that the farmers cannot sell their products, and they have to come to Iran, and they have to come to Tehran and other major cities, we see that they will show their anger in harmony with other citizens.
Right. I'd like to hand it over to all of you now. I'm sorry, Maziar.
You don't have to do it.
Nika Hang, please introduce yourself and please be as concise as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Nikai Kosar, cartoonist and editor of Khodnevis.org. Maziar, in your book, you say that you somehow encouraged your driver to vote. And you were also, you voted for Mousavi. So I was wondering, in your reporting, were you somehow pro-Mousavi, or you tried to just keep yourself objective?
I tried to be objective, but I was pro-Mousavi, yeah. But, it's just that what you want to do ideally and what you can be, I think, is different. And also, that's the role of the editor as well, because as a reporter on the ground, I can be pro-Mousavi or I can be biased, but then the editor can use his or her prerogative in order to neutralize the pieces. But I think, like any other sane person, I was not for Ahmadinejad. So I think it was. I think I had pro-Mousavi bias. Yeah, I have to accept that. Yeah.
Barbara Slavin.
Barbara Slavin from the Atlantic Council. Maziar, it's a great book. Two questions. One, did you ever figure out why Mr. Rosewater had this fascination with New Jersey and New Jersey Islam, which, and how did you keep yourself from breaking out into laughter when he was saying some of these ridiculous things? And let's see, I had another one, but it's, there are still people in this town, not very many admittedly, but a few, who think that there was no fraud in the election and go around insisting that there was no fraud. Is there something definitive you can say? I know you interview this composite figure, Amir, that really shows that massive fraud was committed on the day of the election. Thanks.
Well, for the New Jersey, I think I explained it in the book that one of the reasons that I can think of, I never asked him about that, is that you know that the Iranian diplomats in New York, in UN mission, they cannot travel beyond the 25-mile radius of their office on 3rd Avenue. So many of them, they choose to live in New Jersey. And traditionally, there's been a community of Iranian diplomats in New Jersey, like our friend Mehdi Sarkis, he lives in New Jersey as well. And many Iranians, diplomats live there. So I think one of the reasons that he was fascinated with New Jersey is that someone or one of his relatives or someone he knew came back to Iran, and all he talked about was New Jersey this, New Jersey that. That's it. I don't know. And, you know, as a kid growing up in Iran, I had fascination, like crazy fascination with different cities as well. Of course, like many Iranians who are here, you know, we know about San Francisco. You know, I thought that, you know, from Daijan Nafedon, Uncle Napoleon, we had to talk about San Francisco. Or, you know, I loved Cincinnati Kid, the movie with Steve McQueen. And when I went to Cincinnati, I was really disappointed. But it's a nice city, but you know, it wasn't as exotic as I saw in Cincinnati.
That's how that guy, your interrogator, will feel when he goes to New Jersey.
Exactly. Yeah. And also about the election, the fraud. I think. I mean, it's crazy that people said there was no fraud. It was just obvious that if the government was so prepared to crack down on the opposition, if this government was so ready to arrest anyone who was against the result of the elections, I think that is an indication that there was a fraud. But also, I don't know how it can be possible that around 4:30 in the afternoon, like about 4 hours before the polls were closed, Fars News Agency released statistics that 20 million people voted for Ahmadinejad. And then I called someone in Ahmadinejad's campaign, and he said that it's 20 million now, but it's going to be 25 million. And that's around 4:35 p.m. So people can say that there is no evidence of fraud in Iran. Of course, no one has, I mean, people have brought forward some evidence of fraud, but people don't have access to the information and they cannot use it. I've heard that there are some evidence that people are bringing out, but I think the circumstantial evidence shows that there was fraud.
I was thinking, what was the evidence that it was a just election? I would like to put the burden on proof on those who say it was a just election. So what was the evidence it was a just election?
Well, I mean, one of these people who said that there was no fraud, he said he went to Tehran and he saw millions of people on the street on the anniversary of the revolution. And because of that, he says that there was, his government has a lot of support.
There was a poll that has been referred to that supposedly showed 2/3 support for Ahmadinejad.
Yes. Yeah, there was a telephone poll, I think, conducted by an American organization. But in Iran, as far as we know, all the pollsters and the people who conduct this kind of statistics, they can be imprisoned. As we know, Ghazian and Abdi, they went to prison specifically because of that. So I don't regard any poll valid because of that, because there is no freedom for people. And a lot of people are afraid to answer, and we have to know what the circumstances of that vote. But as I'm saying, many people supported Khamenei, and because of that, they supported Ahmadinejad. Many people, at least a big minority.
Let's take a couple together. Roberto and this gentleman here.
Roberto Toscano, Wilson Center. I have a very specific question. At a certain point in your book, you describe an attack against the Basij headquarters. And you say it was the work of some MKO militants. My question is the following. Usually we think that the presence of MKO within the country is not so significant. But what you describe makes me think that maybe that's not the case. So the question is, what is the situation about MKO within Iran? And the second question is, what is your connection with Anton Chekhov? But that's another.
Well, Anton Chekhov acts on the 6th protocol of the Elders of Zion. Yeah, I do that 7th one. But the MKO question is an interesting one. I never say in the book that I know for sure that it was MKO. I had a source in the Ministry of Intelligence who told me that it had all the footprints of MKO. And not the attack itself, but provoking people into attacking that building. Because many people can testify that the demonstration was quite peaceful. People were peacefully marching towards Azadi Freedom Square. And then we saw a group of people attacking the building, and then the besiegers, they started to shoot at people. And I filmed the whole thing. And you can see that those people who were attacking the building, they were not peaceful. Some of them were quite ready. So I think, from what I observed, and I filmed, and I can show the whole thing to people, is that a small group of people, very insignificant number of people, started to attack the building and then provoked young men and women who had genuine grievances against the government, who hate the besieged for different reasons. They joined them in attacking. And then by besieged starting to shoot at people, the situation just became worse, and there were more attacks and there was more shooting. And that's a very small example compared to what happened in 1988 when the MKO forces attacked Iran, and they created a resentment among the Iranian population. So MKO, I think, has a very small following in Iran. They don't have that much support, but they have some support. The government, according to different numbers, they've killed any number of the MKO members, from 10,000 to 20,000. I'm not sure what is their own statistics, but thousands of MKO members were killed, massacred by this government. And those thousands of MKO members, they have brothers, sisters, cousins. And in a country like Iran, where martyrdom used to be celebrated, and there's a very strong family bond, there are many Iranians who feel that hatred against the regime because they've killed their brother, because they've killed their cousins. So I think as a result, MKO has a strong following among certain groups of people in Iran, but it doesn't have the popular support in Iran.
Hi, James Kitfield from National Journal Magazine. I wonder if you'd update us on what you think the state of the Green Movement is. I think the conventional wisdom in this town is it's been pretty successfully crushed. You had some hopeful comments about, when the day of judgment comes, how these people should be dealt with. I think the conventional wisdom, again, here is this regime's got a pretty tight hold on the country. And also, how you think the Arab Spring dynamic affects both the opposition movement, but also the government in Tehran in terms of, are they nervous? Clearly, what's happening in Syria has made them very nervous, but just if you could update us on those.
Sure. I think the Green Movement really changed its objective and character on the 19th of June, a week after the elections, when Ayatollah Khamenei delivered the sermon at Friday prayers. For a week, the Green Movement started as a movement in support of Mousavi, and then it became a movement against Ahmadinejad's re-election. But then on the 19th of June, for a week they had hopes that Khamenei would somehow relent and somehow accept the people's votes. But on the 19th of June, when Khamenei said that people should go back home and that any bloodshed, people would be responsible for any bloodshed, then it became a movement against Khamenei, and it became a movement against an unelected leader of the country. And I think right now the Green Movement is really redefining itself. I think different people within the Green Movement, they try to be its leaders, and some of the reformists, They are saying that they are the green movement. But I think people in Iran, and the majority of people who support the green movement, they regard it as a movement against Khamenei's tyranny. What they want, I'm not sure, and I don't think that many people know what they want in the place of Khamenei. That is up for debate. But right now, they know what they don't want, and that is Khamenei's tyranny. And the Arab Spring, it had several different effects in Iran. I mean, it rejuvenated the green movement again, because for 1 year, we didn't see any street demonstrations in Iran. And then after the fall of Ben Ali and Mubarak, Ben Ali in Tunisia and Mubarak in Egypt, we saw many Iranians came to the streets and started chanting, after Mubarak and Ben Ali, it's the turn of Sayyid Ali Khamenei. So it had that effect among the opposition. And I think the fall of every dictator in the region gives hope to people, but it also makes the regime a bit nervous. So even though they're talking about their support for the Libyan uprising, I'm sure that the regime is quite nervous about the downfall of Gaddafi. But it also had another effect that I think many people have missed, and that is nervousness among Ahmadinejad and his people, and their campaign in order to distance themselves from Khamenei. I think since the success of Arab Spring, Ahmadinejad and his people, they've been really trying hard to distance themselves from Khamenei because they do not want to be on a sinking ship with Khamenei. And as a result, they are talking about this Iranian Islam, and they're trying to provoke people's nationalist sentiments. And what we see, the infighting between Khamenei and Ahmadinejad, I think is one of the results of the intensification of this infighting is the result of the effect of Arab Spring on Iran.
I want to call on our friend Omid Memarian in a second to comment on this, but on that topic of kind of comparing Iran and the Arab Spring, there has been this conventional wisdom among kind of Iranian intellectuals for the last few decades that by virtue of the fact that Iranians have experienced firsthand the perils of joining mosque and state, that somehow Iranians were ahead of the curve in the Middle East, and that Arabs would also one day have to experience kind of living under an Islamic republic. So they no longer romanticize about political Islam. You travel a lot in the Arab world. Are you confident that the Iranians, especially kind of at kind of the intellectual level or at the street level, are somehow they've gotten this idea of Islamist politics out of their system, and they're ready to move forward with a kind of a post-Islamic or secular system? And would you say that kind of Iranians are ahead of the curve on that vis-a-vis Arabs?
No, I mean, the thing is that I think many Iranians are wrong about what is happening in Egypt and Tunisia. I was in Egypt and Tunisia recently, and in both countries, the movements are not Islamic. There are Islamists within the movement, but neither of them are inspired by the Iranian Revolution, 1979 revolution, unlike what the Iranian regime claims. Even in Tunisia, the Islamist leaders told me that after the election of Ahmadinejad in 2005, the Tunisian Islamist leaders went to Iran and they tried to have a dialogue with Ahmadinejad, and he did not even respond to their calls, reply their calls. But now Iran may want to have influence through financing those movements and financing Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. I'm not sure whether they would accept it or not, but right now they want to jump on the bandwagon of these movements in the region. But also I think when Mousavi said that the movements in Egypt and Tunisia, they're the continuation of the Green Movement in Iran. That's wrong as well, because when you ask young Egyptians and the people who were at the vanguard of those movements in Tunisia and Egypt, they did not know anything about the movement in Iran, either the Green Movement. Their main source of inspiration is the overthrow of Milosevic through peaceful means in the early 2000s, and the Yugoslavian Otpor movement in Yugoslavia. And they read Otpor literature from Yugoslavia. And Otpor literature is, of course, based on the theories of Gene Sharp, who is demonized in Iran as the CIA mastermind.
Omid, did you have some thoughts about the role of Islam in Iranian society and politics in the coming years and decades?
I had the privilege to serve my military service at the Revolutionary Guard and Revolutionary Guards, and I remember that I shared this story with Maziar a few nights ago. That I used to write like speeches for the commander. So for Monday morning speech. For his Monday morning speech, and I remember that I wrote a lot of things about how people should behave and about the role of the role of Islam and that kind of thing, Islamic thoughts in the speech for the entire military complex, and the day I was leaving the complex, and the guy, the commander, was always very critical of my behavior in the office, and he always told me that, Omid, why do you read this newspaper? It's a very secular newspaper. This is a very, it belongs to infidels. Why you are bringing these things to the office? And so I was very like, I always thought the commander is somebody who's so religious and he's a true believer. The day I was leaving the complex, I remember that one of my colleagues said, you're leaving the complex, and I know you're not coming back here, but I want to tell you something. Don't take what the commander said very seriously, because I'm the movie guy for the commander. I said, what do you mean? He said, I bring him like movies every week, like 2 or 3 movies, and he says always that bring me sahnedar. Bring me movies that has sex scenes, and I was so surprised and said, "Are you kidding me?" And he said, "No." When his wife goes to visit her family, I bring him porn. So it really surprised me that somebody who is really serious about just promoting Islam and Islamic thought and the ideology of Islamic Republic, at the same time he's that hypocrite too. So for me, I think even at the core of the Islam, I work with the government and many on different side of the political spectrum, and I have never seen that even those who are in charge of promoting the Islamic thought and the ideology of the Islamic Republic, I've seen many of them do not believe in what they are promoting. So, and among the people, my belief is that we have experienced this. I think we have had this fantasy that that might work and that might be a savior to mix politics and religion. But we have got to the point that I think we are far from that now, and you see how the number of clerics in the parliament is getting less and less, and how even clerics try to gain like masters and PhDs, and so they want to be called as a Mr. Doctor, for example, Rouhani, not the cleric, Rouhani the cleric. So I think we are in a very good position now, and if something happens, if something comes out of this overwhelming frustration inside the country, which we call that green movement, that overwhelming frustration, I think that's going to be something much more secular and away from that kind of ideology. However, I agree that Iran still is a very religious country, but what I mean is just to remove religion from politics.
Mm. Most of the very religious people I met in Iran, and most of the clerics I met in Iran, they do not agree. They really resent this government because they think that this government has tarnished the image of religion in the country. Because when you see ordinary clerics, honest clerics, they get on a taxi and, the government officials, of course, they don't ride in shared taxis. When you talk to them, they hate this government. They say that, we are insulted because of what Khamenei is doing, or because the people in charge of the regime are doing.
Yeah. More questions? Please.
I'm Norman Newrider from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And for several years now, we've been trying to engage Iran through science cooperation, exchanges of workshops, and so on. Recently, or a year or two ago, there were assassinations of 2 nuclear scientists in Iran. Can you comment on that at all, or what your opinion or what you know about it? One of those people was actually quite close to Westerners. He was representative to Sesame, which is a collective action on the accelerator.
I mean, I know as much as other people in the room know about that case. Of course, I condemn any kind of acts of violence, including assassinations. But I know that they said that Iran is has one of the highest rankings in terms of scientific research right now last year. And when you look at the papers that they've written, it's mostly about the nuclear science. I think Iran is investing a lot in nuclear science and anything that has to do with nuclear technology, because the government wants to use that as a bargaining chip. They've realized that the regime in North Korea has been very successful in protecting itself by developing a nuclear weapon. I'm not sure if they want to build a nuclear weapon or not, but they want to have the capability to build a nuclear weapon and use that as a bargaining chip in order to survive, for the survival of the regime. And otherwise, I really have no insight into who were behind the assassinations of the reporters. And one of the people who had an assassination attempt against him, he's the head of the nuclear atomic energy in Iran now.
He was important in the project. I don't think he's head of the Atomic Energy Commission, but he was important.
No, but he was assassinated. The person who had assassination attempt against him, who survived the assassination, he's the head of the atomic energy right now. Yeah.
What, Abbasi?
Pardon me?
Abbasi?
Abbasi? What's his name? Abbasi? Yeah, Abbasi, yeah.
Well, some said the Mossad did it, others say the Americans did it, Special Forces mission. Do you have any idea who did it?
I have no idea. Neither Mossad, MI6, or CIA, they're paying my wages, so I'm not talking to them until they pay me for my services. So they don't give me any information either. I don't know.
In principle, do you agree with the idea of what we're doing, that is this engagement with the Iranian science community?
I think any kind of engagement with people of Iran is good, and I wish there were more of this kind of engagements in the past during the Bush administration, and I wish even during the Clinton administration there were more engagements like that. But right now, the government is very suspicious of any kind of engagement, and some people have been thrown to jail because they have facilitated exchange programs between Iranians and Americans.
Thanks.
More questions? While you think of questions, the one question I always have for people is, a two-part question. Among kind of your generation of Iranians, do you see anyone, whether in the diaspora or within the country, who is capable of a position of leadership? I sense that these young folks on the streets and university students are craving some type of leadership, and they don't know where to go. Do you see anyone among your generation of Iranians who you think is capable of carrying that mantle? And second, if you had to kind of devise the perfect Iranian opposition figure on paper, what would he or she look like? Could it be a she? What attributes would he or she have? Would it be someone who's a cleric, a non-cleric, religious, secular, a nationalist? What attributes would that kind of perfect opposition figure have that could be capable of, of kind of uniting this very diverse population?
Well, unfortunately, I don't see anyone as a leader right now. And I think that's a positive thing, because people are very skeptical about leaders. And also with the advent of the social networking and, Facebook and the internet, people can criticize leaders and whatever they say. So right now, it's not like top-down anymore, like at the time of, Lenin or Castro, that the revolutionary leaders would just send leaflets and literature to their followers, and the followers would just receive it. Right now, if revolutionary leaders say something, they can be answered on Facebook or Twitter, and I think that is one of the beauties of these social networking sites, that they somehow give a context to the leaders' speeches and the leaders' messages. I don't see any leaders right now, and this committee, this unknown committee of the Green Movement, I accept that, some of them, because of security reasons, they have to be them, but they have to be a little bit more transparent in their strategies and in their ideas than they are before. I think the main thing about a leader in Iran, whether it's a woman or a man or
could it
whatever,
be a woman? Is the society ready for that?
Yeah, I think the society is very much ready for that. Yeah, I don't think that the government is ready for that, but I think the society at large, they are ready for that. I think it has to be someone who is not part of this regime, who could be part of the regime maybe in the past, but has to be someone who has not been part of the Ahmadinejad government in the past. And I think the successful candidate should be able to communicate to those 3 or 4 classes of people I told you about: the traditional clergy, the bazaris, the workers and farmers, but also has to be someone who can have some dialogue with some people in this government now, people around Khamenei or people who support Khamenei right now. But one thing that has to be made clear is that Khamenei cannot be part of a future in Iran. It's just that I think anyone who wants to have a dialogue with the system cannot have a dialogue with Khamenei, because that person, he or she, would be rejected by the majority of people. I think Khamenei really betrayed people's trust, and he cannot be trusted as a partner in any kind of negotiation.
Khamenei is about 72 years old now. He's probably not in the best of health. He has a lot of stress in his life. Assuming that he's one day going to die, what do you see in Iran in a kind of post-Khamenei order, where the position of supreme leader still exists?
I don't think that there will be a supreme leader. I think the Khamenei is the last monarch of Iran. I think, as I said, I don't see Khamenei's supreme leadership as really part of a republic. I think Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was not the last monarch of Iran. I think Khamenei is the last monarch of Iran. In the past, we used to say Shah is the shadow of God. Now he's the representative of God. So there will be some sort of council, or there will be another regime. But I wouldn't be surprised if Khamenei will change within the next, 4 or 5 years. Because the situation is really not tenable. I don't think that he can survive. And this kind of opposition and this situation, especially with the infighting with Ahmadinejad, it will be very difficult for him to survive. If he allows Ahmadinejad to finish his tenure, then what would they do with Ahmadinejad and his gang? In the past, all the president would have another position within the government, or they would lead foundations. But Ahmadinejad and the gang and the cult around him, they want to get rid of the clerical system. So they would be in the opposition after his term finishes in 2013. So they have to think of something. So it will be very, very problematic for Khamenei, but also it will, I think any leader of the opposition who says that we have to negotiate with Khamenei as part of the system will be rejected by people. I think what Khatami said a few months ago that, we have to have a dialogue, or what Mazrui, one of the members of the Green Movement, said that we have to have negotiations with this system, when the people in the system, I think it's right. People have to have negotiations with the system, but they have to make clear who in the system and who not in the system. And I think Khamenei should not be included in that.
Speaking of kind of young generation of Iranian leaders, our friend Ali Vaiz is in the audience, so I'm going to kind of burden him in a second with the question. But when you look at prospects for change in Iran, and you compare Iran to other places in the world in which transitions have taken place, whether South Africa or Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, etc. Which model do you find most similar to Iran in terms of Iran's in the coming years in Iran? Do you see kind of a gradual decay and malaise like the Soviet Union, that eventually kind of the system collapses under the weight of its own ideological malaise and economic malaise? Or do you see something very abrupt and unpredictable like we saw in Tunisia and Egypt?
I really have no idea. I hope that it can be something gradual and something that can be nonviolent and something that would not result in secession of different regions from Iran. I think that would be really tragic if something like that happened. But in my book, I always say that anyone who tells you I know what's going to happen in Iran is either a charlatan or a clairvoyant, and I'm neither of them. So I don't know, but I can just wish for a peaceful change in Iran and wish for kind of national reconciliation after the change of the regime or change of the status quo, because I don't think that the form of the regime is really important. I mean, it can be called an Islamic Republic, but and it even can have a supreme leader, but if the supreme leader is just a titular leader without any real power, that would be fine.
Like
I don't
constitutional
think
monarch.
Constitutional monarch, and that would be fine. But it's important that people should be accountable to people, not to God, because God is an abstract subject, and people should be accountable to people. I just think that this movement, all the movement that we are witnessing around the region, they are for accountable government. They are for gaining the dignity of citizens as citizens of the country, and not slaves to the master. That's most important. And whether the supreme leader, the name is supreme leader, is president or constitutional monarch, whatever, it's not very important.
I wanted to call on Ali Vaiz in the back if you had a question.
Thank you very much, Maziar Jan. Wonderful book, and I want to congratulate you on sort of breaking a taboo about talking about your personal life and your family life, something that Iranians usually don't do. And you talked about the fact that Iran currently, the movement doesn't have a leadership as a positive thing. I'm afraid that not having a leader, we're going from having a charismatic leader like Khomeini all the way to not having a leader at all. And I think we're going from one extreme to another. The reason that I'm afraid that this might be a very good idea is that because of lack of leadership, there's no planning, there's no vision for the future. Where do you see the vision coming from? What should we do to have a clear idea, at least to create a consensus among the opposition abroad?
Well, I think what happened was in June 2009 was a shock to the system and also shock for people. The regime was really surprised by the number of people who opposed the re-election and came to the streets. But also, I think many people were surprised by their own numbers. I remember that and I explained that in the book, when I went to the demonstration on the 25th of June. No, it was the 15th of June, 25th of Khordad, 15th of June, 2009, when the first demonstration happened. And people couldn't believe that there were so many people on the streets. It was just mind-boggling. I don't think anyone expected that to happen. So I think people are still coming to terms with the fact that there are so many people who can do something, who can make a change. And I'm saying in the short term, it's a positive thing to have, not to have a leader or leadership, because people are discussing who can be the leader. Like Karim is asking me, what are the attributions of the leader? Or people are asking that themselves. Whether Mousavi can be a good leader, whether Karoubi can be a good leader, whether this council, whose members we don't know, can be a good leader. It's a positive phenomenon that people are discussing that. But of course, you cannot be leaderless for the rest of your life. And the same thing is happening in Tunisia, for example. There is no one leader in Tunisia. There is a council with a very, very long name right now in power in Tunisia, the Council to Protect the Achievements of the Revolution and for the betterment of the future, whatever. And I think that council, that something like that can happen in Iran as well. And hopefully that can happen.
When I asked you, Maziar, if you saw anyone among your generation of Iranians who's capable of a position of leadership, I was hoping you were going to nominate yourself. But I think you're too smart to answer that way. In any case,
you?
No, certainly not me.
Nikahang.
But I wanted to thank you again, Maziar, for coming. It's really a beautiful book, a terrific book. I recommend it to all of you. And thank you for coming. And you have an open invite anytime.
Thank you.